look at the Fergus Falls Kirkbride, first we must explore the past of the building's namesake. Thomas Story Kirkbride was a physician, psychiatrist, and developer of the Kirkbride plan. He was born to a Quaker family on July 31st in Morrisville, Pennsylvania. He worked and interned at the Friends Asylum and Philadelphia's Pennsylvania Hospital during his time at college. In 1828, he began at the University of Pennsylvania studying medicine, and after graduating in 1832, he started his practice from 1835 to 1840. When he stopped his practice in 1840, he accepted a job at the newly established Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane. Kirkbride was a founding member of the Association of Medical Superintendents of American Institution for the Insane, which would later become the American Psychiatric Association. He first served as a secretary, then eventually worked his way up to becoming president from 1862 to 1870. During this time, he pioneered what would be known as the Kirkbride Plan, which aimed to improve medical care for the insane as a standardization for buildings that housed the patients. In 1854, Kirkbride wrote and published his book on the construction, organization, and general arrangements of hospitals for the insane. His plan set forth ideas that included using terms such as calling them hospitals and not using terms such as asylums or lunatics. He also strongly suggested that capacity should never go beyond 250 patients, but this was never really followed, which could be attributed to the building's failures. The architecture adopted a batwing-style floor plan, which Kirkbride believed allowed patients more natural light and air circulation. The first hospital designed under the plan was the Trenton State Hospital in Trenton, New Jersey. A total of 73 Kirkbride-style buildings were built throughout the United States from 1854 to 1910. The second-to-last building ever made in the U.S. had yet to be decided on a final location. Brainerd, Fergus Falls, Sauk Center, and Alexandria were all in the running to be the location for the building. But on December 14, 1886, Fergus Falls was selected as the hospital site by a vote of 4-1 by the State Board of Health.
Nowadays, the most structurally intact building that was created in the image of Thomas Kirkbride is the Fergus Falls State Hospital. Originally called the State Hospital for the Insane, the building now has solidified itself as a core part of the history of Fergus Falls. Warren Dunnell designed the layout of the Kirkbride building in Fergus Falls. He was an American architect who mainly worked on buildings in Minnesota. He designed it on the Kirkbride plan but changed the wings to curves more so that it was a U-shape. He planned that the longer-term, more aggressive patients would stay on the far parts of the building, and the short-term, less aggressive people would stay near the middle. They had a farm that stretched about 500 acres and would let the farmers that were admitted tend to it, and they taught the women how to knit. There were 20 different wards in the hospital. Some were for psychopaths, sick people, and other people with epilepsy. On its opening day on July 29, 1890, 2 men came from an otter-tailed judge, and then 80 were transferred from the St. Peter Hospital. Eventually, in the 1920s, the population of the hospital rose to 1,700, way surpassing the recommended 250 patients. During this time, the population of Fergus Falls more than doubled. Even though the building was built to solve overpopulation, the hospital itself became overcrowded with the people who usually stayed for life. The court system treated the hospital as a place to throw social outcasts into isolation. Once in the building's history, there was a man that escaped the hospital and tried to hurt his wife, but ended up killing the woman who was renting his old farm. Then there was an incident where a patient threw a floor rubber at another patient and killed him. They started to teach the patients how to cope with their sickness. They were on the leading end of the electric shock therapy that would put a person under anesthesia and would send large amounts of electricity through the brain, which could give them seizures and try to reverse their mental illness. And it would work, but in some cases, it would cause memory loss and fractured bones, and other side effects. The ways to cure the problems have become a lot safer today. In 1985, the hospital's name would change to the Fergus Falls Regional Treatment Center to reflect its new mission of helping people with mental illnesses humanely. Eventually, in 2005, the building was closed and was then sold to the city in 2007. Now it stands as one of the only remaining Kirkbride buildings. Yet the city of Fergus Falls has argued that the building is too large for a small town to redevelop or maintain. It has considered demolishing it. Now the grounds are used for car shows, concerts, and Summerfest. The Summerfest started as a Scandinavian heritage festival around 46 years ago, but it now has become larger with activities and entertainment. Nurse homes located near the building have been renovated into apartments. While the main building has been mostly untouched, the city has been in talks about destroying the building and is currently in the process of taking suggestions for renovations. Preservationists have fought to save the main building. The group Friends of the Kirkbride have been fighting for the building ever since its closure in 2005. They plan rallies and speak to the city council and try to save the building from being demolished. They had plans to develop the site and buildings into a hotel, a spa, and restaurants, but roadblocks began popping up over the financing, and eventually the idea was canned. Now the building sits on its own, overlooking the city of Fergus Falls from its secluded area. We may not know what is to come of the building, but we can only hope that its historic value and teachings stick with people of Fergus Falls for years and years to come.
Now we interview a resident of Fergus Falls while the Kirkbride was still up and running. What do you know about the history of the Kirkbride?
I know the building opened in 1890. It was kind of a self-sustaining building and had its own, they grew their own vegetables, they had their own cemetery, they have their own morgue, their own tunnel system. They tried to help people as much as they can. They've created a lot of jobs for the area.
Did you have any experiences with the Kirkbride?
I volunteered in the kitchen a couple times, and because of that I got to see some of the tunnels and the gymnasium, and we went on a guided tour in probably 2010 or 11 and saw a lot of the Kirkbride. And my dad's cousin, actually many years ago, his family was in a car accident and he hit his head in the windshield and had a traumatic brain injury, and so they had to check him into the state hospital because they couldn't care for him, and he lived the rest of his life up there.
With everything that you know about Fergus Falls and the Kirkbride building, do you think the building benefited Fergus Falls?
Yeah, it benefited Fergus Falls. It provided a lot of jobs for the community. I'm not sure how good it was for the patients, because back then patients weren't treated very well back in the 20s and 30s in any facility like that around the country. That's why they had the tunnels, because then they didn't have to have the patients go outside. They could get them to where they needed to go underground.